Just a quick video to show you some of the possibilities in ArcGIS when you're creating a model. It's basically the code block down below in the calculate field. Now, some of you have been wandering around the internet and finding Python or arcade code blocks and trying to use them to reduce the complexity of your model. And I can understand that because some of these models can be quite complex. So you'll start with a little model like this, and then as you build it up, it gets more complex until finally you have a really complex model calculating something. And some of the models I've shown you are much more complex than this. And so I've developed just a really short example here, a very small model to show you in calculating a field. So the problem is, how do we calculate or assign the values for our canopy interception in this case? And we work through how to do selections and assignments, and you do 4 of those in a row, so you get a somewhat complicated model to show the calculations and assignments. You get maybe 20 or 30 bubbles to do this relatively simple thing, and some of you have seen some streamlined things. Well, that's what this model does, and it uses that code block, so I'll show that to you here. First, let's look at the data, though. So here, if I open the attribute table for this data, I have my typical type, conifer, and canopy height, tall or short, and I've created an interception variable, and I filled it with this -9999, so we can see that, in fact, our model works. And what I'd like to do is then assign, based on this combination of type and canopy, different interception values for each of the 4 different combinations. And so this model does this. So here's my in canopy, and if I right-click and open this, I can see that I have, once it opens, the calculate field here, this input table, and the field name that I'm going to replace, and I have a Python expression. And I built this expression by clicking on the various values here to build a code block. And so a code block basically allows you first to define a function here. I'm going to define this assign interception. It takes the type and the canopy height. So the type is the type of tree, deciduous or coniferous, and the canopy height is tall or short. And you see that both of them have these exclamation points about them on either side, showing that those are variables that are to be substituted in. And then I use this code block. I have this def, and I have the same name, assign int has to be the same name. And then these 2 placeholder variables, form and size. This is a form, whether it's going to be a deciduous or coniferous, and size. And I just put this little bit, if size equals tall, then if form equals deciduous, return 0.064. That's going to be the value of the intercept it's going to assign. So anytime it enters within a row, it's going to look at the type and the canopy height. And if it's a tall deciduous, it's going to return back this value to assign to intercept. And this structure is, if it's the size tall, then I want to look at it. If it's deciduous, assign this. Else, if it's coniferous, I want to assign this value. If it wasn't tall, it skips this part and goes to if the size equals short. And then it does the same test. If it's deciduous, I'm going to give it a value, and if it's coniferous, I'm going to give it a different value. Finally, if it was none of those, it's going to return a value of 0. So if it doesn't have short or tall, and deciduous or coniferous. And so you check, and I don't have any errors, the expression is valid. And then I would say, okay, and I would run this. Now, a couple of things. I'm not expecting you to do this. Some of you may want to do this. If you can get it to work, fine. Python is an interesting language. It's used quite a lot for small scripts. It's in this interpreted language. It's pretty easy to write, but it takes a while to learn. And the syntax depends on indentation and getting the precise structures right, so you can spin your wheels a lot. And this isn't a very good debugger. So if you're going to be working inside of Arc to put code blocks in, you should probably know Python first. or copy stuff that's very straightforward and similar to what you're going to be doing, and have debugged with a real Python debugger to know what's going on. And you can't just usually copy this out because to a Python debugger, a lot of them, because it doesn't have a lot of the calls that you need. Sometimes you can for short pieces. I think this one we actually could. So anyway, I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just showing it to some of the folks that have found stuff on the web or that are interested or maybe want to take it a step further. This is an advertisement, I guess, for taking a Python course. There are several available if you're interested in contacting me. Anyway, but it's just to show you how you can transform then a small block of code. So I validate this and then I run it into the same thing that a large block of code will do. So here I run it. It seemed to run successfully. I now go look back at my data set, and sure enough, that intercept has been correctly assigned. Short conifer or tall conifer or short or tall deciduous have the values that they should. So you can code in Python. You don't have to. It's something to learn in additional courses.